The Meridian Peace Summit had been underway for 13 standard days. 13 days of meandering speeches, veiled threats, and diplomatic posturing that had accomplished precisely nothing. 13 days of species representatives arguing over resource allocation, transit rights, and mutual defense protocols while assiduously avoiding any meaningful concessions. 13 days of performative ceremony designed to look like progress while preserving the exact power balance that had brought them to the brink of interstellar conflict in the first place. On the 14th day, a human showed up. The conference chamber's climate controls malfunctioned briefly as the heavy doors slid open. A ripple of cold air swept across the assemblage of diplomats, advisors, and security personnel, momentarily disrupting the carefully regulated temperature balance that kept 17 different species comfortable. Several delegates adjusted their thermal regulation devices with irritated gestures. Ambassador Vexa of the Telharxi Diplomatic Corps was the first to notice the intruder. Their multifaceted eyes narrowed, compound surfaces catching the light in a distinctive pattern that signaled displeasure to those familiar with Telharxi physiology. Point of order. Vexa's translation matrix rendered in the standard diplomatic frequency. There appears to be an unauthorized entity on the observation deck. Every head in the chamber turned toward the indicated direction. Standing casually against the railing of the upper-level observation platform was a human male of average height and unremarkable appearance. He wore standard-issue Terran Concordat military utilities, combat pants and jacket in muted blue-gray, with no visible insignia beyond a small Concordat patch. His right arm was secured in a simple medical immobilizer, the black material contrasting with the uniform. Despite the injury, he maintained an easy posture, leaning slightly on the railing while scrolling through a tablet with his free hand. Chancellor Mthul of the Hegemony rose to his full height, neck frills extending to signal authoritative concern. Security protocols have been breached. This session is closed to all but designated representatives and their registered attachés. The human looked up from his tablet and offered a slight, almost apologetic smile. Commander Miguel Torres, Terran Concordat Special Operations, he stated simply. His voice carried easily through the vast chamber, without apparent amplification. I'm invoking Article 15C of the Meridian Accords as an observer on behalf of human interests in the contested Kepler corridor. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Article 15C was an obscure provision allowing affected parties observer status during territorial negotiations, rarely invoked and even more rarely approved. Ambassador Wythe Prime of the Collective drew up its gelatinous form in evident indignation. Humans have no registered interests in the Kepler sector. The provision does not apply. The commander's smile didn't waver. Actually, as of 7 standard days ago, we established a considerable interest. He tapped something on his tablet. I've just forwarded documentation to the summit registry. 3,427 human civilians residing on Kepler Station now fall under Concordat protection. General Corvex of the Imperial Remnant made a distinctive clicking sound with his mandibles, the equivalent of a derisive snort. Kepler Station was overrun by the cultists of the Infinite. No survivors were reported. That information is outdated, General, Torres replied, his casual tone at odds with the tension spreading through the chamber. The situation has been resolved. Lieutenant Commander Zephanol, intelligence advisor to the Federated Worlds delegation, hurriedly consulted her neural interface. Her eyes widened as data streamed across her consciousness. Confirmed, she announced, voice tight with disbelief. Kepler Station transmitted an all-clear signal approximately 150 standard hours ago. They report... She paused, blinking rapidly. 3,427 civilian survivors, 0 casualties. Chancellor Mthul's frills flattened in skepticism. The cultists seized the station with over 400 armed zealots. They executed the security detail in the first hour of occupation. How could civilians survive unharmed? Torres shifted his weight, adjusting the sling around his broken arm with a slight wince. The cultists were neutralized, he said simply. By whom? Demanded Ambassador Vexa. The human's gaze swept the chamber, taking in the assembled representatives of 17 interstellar powers. By me! The silence that followed was profound. Ambassador Wythe Prime's translucent form rippled with evident disbelief. One human against 437 armed fanatics? This is absurd. 437 confirmed hostile combatants, Torres corrected mildly. And I wasn't alone. I had tactical support from Lieutenant Susan Martinez, who coordinated from the exterior maintenance shaft of Docking Bay 7. He paused. Though she was mostly focused on evacuation contingencies for the civilians if I failed. General Corvex's compound eyes narrowed. You expect us to believe 2 humans neutralized 437 armed cultists? No, General, Torres replied. Lieutenant Martinez provided intelligence and evacuation planning. I handled the neutralization. Would you like to see the after-action report? Before anyone could respond, Torres tapped his tablet again. The central holographic display of the conference chamber flickered, then filled with tactical imagery. Time-stamped security footage showed corridors of Kepler Station, residential sections, command centers, all containing the distinctive robed figures of the cultists of the infinite. The footage jumped and shifted between locations, following a single figure moving through the station with methodical precision. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the lone human systematically dismantled the occupation force. Some sequences showed direct confrontations, brief, brutal, and efficient. Others revealed elaborate traps, environmental manipulations, and strategic misdirection. In many cases, cultists simply disappeared from one frame to the next, neutralized too quickly for the security sensors to capture the moment. The Kepler ghost, whispered Lieutenant Commander Zephanol. The cultists were sending fragmented transmissions about a vengeful spirit hunting them through the station. Intelligence dismissed it as paranoid ravings. Torres shrugged his good shoulder. Psychological warfare is effective across most sapient species. Fear degrades decision-making. Ambassador Vexa's multifaceted eyes shifted through color patterns, indicating intense calculation. The timestamp data indicates this operation lasted 73 standard hours. Did you not require rest, Commander? I took 4 combat naps of approximately 20 minutes each, Torres replied, as if discussing nothing more significant than a light workout. Stimulant protocols covered the rest. Chancellor Mthul gestured, and the holographic display paused on an image of Torres moving through what appeared to be a makeshift cultist command center. 5 robed figures lay on the floor around him, while he accessed a computer terminal, apparently unbothered by the carnage. How many confirmed kills are attributed to you in this operation, Commander? Mthul asked, voice carefully neutral. Torres consulted his tablet briefly. 147 confirmed. The remainder were incapacitated, but survived with medical treatment. The climate control in the chamber seemed to falter again, this time trending warmer as the environmental system struggled to compensate for the collective shift in body temperatures among the assembled delegates. Dr. Nethkul, xenopsychology specialist for the Harmonious Alignment, leaned forward. Commander, your psychological profile during this operation. Were you experiencing combat stress, survival fear response, revenge motivation? Torres looked genuinely puzzled by the question. None of those, he replied after a moment's consideration. It was just a job that needed doing. A job, repeated Dr. Nethkul, mandibles clicking in what those familiar with her species recognized as profound disquiet. Yes, Torres confirmed. Cultists had civilians. Civilians needed protection. It's what we do. He glanced at his tablet again. Though I was a bit annoyed about missing my nephew's birthday. The arm was inconvenient too. The observation sent another ripple of unease through the assembly. Most species present had extensive psychological conditioning programs for their combat personnel. The concept of treating mass combat as a routine inconvenience, mentioned in the same context as a missed social obligation, violated numerous xenopsychological models. General Korvex gestured sharply, and the holographic display shifted to a statistical analysis. Our military simulations predicted a minimum force of 200 specialized troops would be required to retake Kepler Station, with expected civilian casualties of 60% or higher. How do you account for the discrepancy? Torres tilted his head slightly, studying the data with mild interest. Your models are based on conventional military doctrine, he said. They assume direct confrontation, force-on-force engagement, and adherence to standardized tactical principles. He smiled faintly. Humans don't fight that way unless we have to. Elaborate, commanded Chancellor Mthul. Torres set his tablet down on the railing and gestured with his good hand. Your species, most of you, evolved from pack predators or highly coordinated social structures. You fight in units, with clearly defined roles and hierarchies. It's encoded in your genetics, reinforced by your military traditions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Humans are different. We evolved as persistence predators and opportunistic omnivores. We can do the pack thing when needed, but we're equally comfortable as solo operators. This still doesn't explain the massive discrepancy in force projection calculations, insisted Yth Prime. Your calculations are based on probability matrices that assume predictable responses to tactical situations. Torres replied. They can't account for human adaptability or our comfort with improvisation. Your models treat unpredictability as a weakness, a deviation from optimal strategy. For us, it's a feature, not a bug. He pointed to a specific data cluster in the holographic display. Look at your casualty projections. They assume rational actor behavior, that the cultists would use civilians as tactical leverage, and that the response force would accept some civilian losses as unavoidable in a hostage scenario. That is standard strategic doctrine, confirmed General Korvex. But it's not human doctrine, Torres countered. Not when dealing with civilians under our protection. We operate on a zero-tolerance basis for civilian casualties. It changes the entire tactical approach. Ambassador Vex's multifaceted eyes shifted through several color patterns. You speak of humans collectively. Commander, are we to understand your performance at Kepler Station represents typical human combat capability? Torres actually laughed at that. A short, genuine sound that echoed strangely in the tense atmosphere of the conference chamber. God, no, he said, still smiling. I'm average at best. We have operators who could have done the job in half the time with a third of the resources. The only reason I was assigned is that I happened to be the closest qualified person when the situation developed. I was on leave in a nearby system, visiting family. This statement created more visible consternation among the delegates than anything that had come before. Tactical specialists hurriedly consulted neural interfaces, while security officers shifted uncomfortably at their posts. Dr. Manal, the Unified Republic's foremost expert on human psychology, raised a tentative appendage. Commander, I must clarify. Are you stating that neutralizing 437 armed hostiles alone while protecting 3,000 civilians represents merely average performance for a human military specialist? Torres considered this, then nodded. For special operations personnel, yes. It wasn't particularly complex as these things go. Limited environment, clearly defined hostile force, straightforward objective. He gestured to his immobilized arm. I got sloppy at one point, hence the fracture. My performance rating was actually downgraded because of it. The chamber erupted in multiple conversations, translation matrices struggling to keep pace with the overlapping dialogues. Chancellor Mthul raised all four arms for silence, neck frills fully extended in a display of maximum authority. Commander Torres, he said when order had been restored. You must understand the implications of what you're telling us. If we accept your account as factual, it would require a complete recalibration of strategic doctrine regarding human military capability. Torres nodded. That's partly why I'm here. He picked up his tablet again. The cultists' manifesto specifically mentioned targeting the Kepler corridor as a protest against the summit. They believed disrupting civilian transit would force concessions from the major powers. He glanced around the chamber. They were wrong about their methods, but not entirely wrong about the strategic importance of Kepler. He tapped the tablet, and the holographic display shifted to show shipping lanes, transit nodes, and resource extraction sites throughout the disputed sector. Humans have a vested interest in the stability of this region, Torres continued. Not for military advantage or resource control, but because we have civilians living there, families, communities. His expression hardened slightly. The kind of people I'm tasked with protecting. Is that a threat, Commander? Asked Ambassador With Prime, its gelatinous form rippling with apparent agitation. Not at all, Torres replied evenly. It's context for why I'm invoking observer status. The decisions made in this summit will affect human lives. I'm here to ensure those lives are given proper consideration. General Korvax made a dismissive gesture. 3,000 civilians hardly constitute a significant demographic factor in interstellar policy. Torres met the general's compound gaze directly. Would you like to explain that perspective to the families I just spent 73 hours ensuring would see their loved ones again? He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in the expression. I'd be happy to arrange a face-to-face meeting. The general's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of discomfort among his species. That won't be necessary, Korvax muttered. Chancellor Mthul's neck frills rippled thoughtfully. Commander, your presence here is unprecedented. Even if we accept your observer status under Article 15C, your participation would be limited to registration of formal positions, not active negotiation. I am aware of the limitations, Torres acknowledged. I am not here to negotiate. Then, what precisely is your purpose? Demanded Ambassador Vexa. Torres reached into a pocket of his utility jacket and withdrew a small, crystalline data storage device. He set it on the railing before him, where it caught the light, refracting it in complex patterns across the chamber. This contains comprehensive security analyses of all major power installations, defensive networks, and strategic assets throughout the contested sectors, he said calmly. It includes detailed vulnerability assessments, penetration vectors, and neutralization protocols specific to each system. The stunned silence returned, deeper than before. That information would be classified at the highest levels by every government represented here. Lieutenant Commander Zephanol finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Torres agreed. It would be. If your security systems were capable of preventing human intelligence services from accessing it. He gestured to the data crystal. Consider this a professional courtesy, a demonstration of good faith. Or a threat, growled General Korvax. Torres shrugged his good shoulder again. Perspective is subjective, General. I prefer to think of it as context for informed decision-making. He picked up the data crystal and tossed it casually to Chancellor Mthul, who caught it reflexively with one of his 4 hands. The Terran Concordat has a straightforward position regarding the Kepler corridor, Torres continued. We don't care who administers it, taxes it, or claims sovereignty over it, as long as civilian transit remains unrestricted and non-combatants are protected from collateral damage in any future conflicts. He tapped his tablet one final time, and the holographic display shifted to show civilian habitats throughout the contested sector, far more than had been officially documented in the summit's shared database. There are currently 173,842 human civilians living in this region, Torres said. Many in settlements too small to register in your strategic calculations, all of them under Concordat protection. He paused, letting the implication settle. I trust this context will inform your deliberations productively. Chancellor Mthul studied the data crystal in his hand with an unreadable expression. The summit will recess for 2 standard hours to process this new information. Of course, Torres agreed amiably. He picked up his tablet and straightened from his position against the railing. I could use some coffee anyway. The stuff they serve in the diplomatic lounge is terrible. As if this mundane observation had broken some spell, the chamber erupted once more in urgent conversations. Security personnel moved toward communication stations, while diplomatic staffers huddled around their principals, speaking in hushed tones. Ambassador Vexa approached Torres as he prepared to leave the observation deck. The Tilharx's multifaceted eyes shifted through patterns, indicating intense curiosity mixed with concern. Commander, Vexa's translation matrix rendered, you must understand that your intervention today has fundamentally altered the diplomatic landscape. There will be consequences. Torres smiled, a genuine expression this time, reaching his eyes. That's the plan, Ambassador. Sometimes systems need a shock to break out of unproductive patterns. He gestured to his broken arm, like setting a fracture so it can heal properly. And what of the balance of power? Vexa pressed. The strategic calculations that have maintained stability, however fragile, among our civilizations. Those calculations were based on incomplete information, Torres replied. Now they'll be more accurate. He nodded toward the data crystal, now being subjected to intensive scanning by Chancellor Mthul's security team. Knowledge is neither a threat nor a promise. It's just reality. How you respond to reality is up to you. With that, he stepped past the ambassador and made his way to the chamber's exit. Several security officers moved, as if to intercept him, then reconsidered as their neural interfaces undoubtedly filled with urgent, stand-down orders from their superiors. As the doors slid open, Torres paused and looked back at the assembled representatives of 17 interstellar powers, now frantically reassessing decades of strategic doctrine based on a single human's casual demonstration of capability. For what it's worth, he called back, I hope you figure out a peaceful solution. War is inefficient. He adjusted his sling with a slight grimace. And personally inconvenient. The doors closed behind him, leaving the summit in disarray. 2 hours stretched to 4, then 6, as emergency communications flooded outward from the station to distant capitals and command centers. Intelligence networks hummed with unprecedented activity as every major power scrambled to verify Torres's claims and assess the implications. When the summit finally reconvened, the atmosphere had changed palpably. Gone was the performative posturing and theatrical indignation that had characterized the first 13 days. In their place was a new sobriety, a collective recognition that the strategic landscape had shifted beneath their feet. Chancellor Mthul opened the session with uncharacteristic directness. The chair recognizes that human interests in the contested sectors have been inadequately accounted for in previous deliberations. This oversight will be rectified in all subsequent discussions. Ambassador Waith Prime's gelatinous form had settled into the more compact configuration its species adopted during serious negotiations. The collective proposes a revision to transit protocols that would establish protected civilian corridors throughout the disputed regions, regardless of which power ultimately claims administrative jurisdiction. General Corvex, whose earlier bellicosity had notably diminished, inclined his head in agreement. The Imperial Remnant would accept such provisions, provided all parties commit to verification protocols. One by one, the major powers staked out new positions, less aggressive, more focused on practical coexistence than territorial maximalism. The human observer status request was approved without objection. Commander Torres, however, did not return to the chamber. Lieutenant Commander Zephanol found him in the station's civilian dining concourse, sitting alone at a small table. He had acquired coffee from somewhere, real coffee, not the synthetic substitute served in the diplomatic lounge, and was scrolling through his tablet with his uninjured hand. "Commander," she greeted him cautiously, "the summit has approved your observer status. Your presence is requested for the afternoon session." Torres glanced up from his tablet. The screen displayed what appeared to be vacation destination options, resort planets, and recreation stations scattered throughout nearby sectors. "Pass along my thanks," he replied, "but I've submitted the official concordant position statement electronically. No need for me to sit through the procedural details." Zephanol hesitated, then asked the question that had been consuming her since the morning session. Was it true, all of it? Or was this an elaborate psychological operation? Torres regarded her thoughtfully, then set his tablet down. "Which answer would make you feel safer, Lieutenant Commander?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," Torres said gently. "If I tell you it was exaggerated, a bluff designed to force diplomatic concessions, your strategic models remain valid. Your understanding of the universe stays intact. You feel safer." He took a sip of his coffee. "But if I confirm that one average human special operator can do what I described, and that there are thousands of us, with varying specialties and capabilities, scattered throughout known space." He shrugged. "That's a much less comfortable reality to integrate into your worldview." Zephanol found herself momentarily speechless. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Which is it?" Torres smiled enigmatically. "The Terran Concordat has a saying, trust, but verify. I've given you all the verification tools you need in that data crystal. The rest is up to you." He glanced at his tablet, which had pinged with a notification. "Ah, good. There's a transport leaving for the Proxima hub in 2 hours. If I make that connection, I can be back in time for my nephew's make-up birthday celebration." He stood, tucking the tablet into a pocket. "The arm should be healed by then too. Modern medicine is amazing, isn't it?" Zephanol watched him gather his few belongings. "The summit is expected to continue for another 7 days at minimum," she said. "Possibly longer, given the recalibrations necessitated by today's revelations." "You don't need me for that part," Torres replied. "The diplomatic corps will handle the details. My job was just to provide context." "Context," Zephanol repeated, the word somehow inadequate for the seismic shift he had triggered in interstellar relations. Torres nodded. "Humans have a vested interest in a stable, peaceful Kepler corridor. We'd prefer to maintain that stability through mutual understanding and respect." His expression remained pleasant, but his eyes conveyed something else entirely. Alternative approaches would be inefficient. With that, he finished his coffee, gave her a casual nod, and walked away, just another traveler making his way through a busy concourse, remarkable only for the medical sling supporting his healing arm. Zephanol remained at the table, trying to process the implications of everything she had witnessed. Her neural interface pinged with an urgent summons back to the summit chamber. But she took a moment to access the preliminary analysis of the data Crystal Torres had provided. The verification confirmed what she had already instinctively accepted. It was all true. One human, not even their best, by his own admission, had neutralized a force that strategic models had deemed untouchable without massive military intervention. And he had done it while protecting every civilian life under his charge, treating the entire operation as nothing more remarkable than an inconvenient workplace obligation. More disturbing still were the security analyses contained in the crystal. Penetration vectors for systems believed impenetrable, vulnerability assessments that rendered obsolete decades of defensive infrastructure development, neutralization protocols that bypassed countermeasures considered state-of-the-art by every major power. And all of it delivered casually, as a diplomatic courtesy. As Zephanol finally rose to return to the summit, she found herself wondering about Torres's parting words. The implicit message seemed clear. Humans preferred peace, but were prepared for alternatives. Given what she now knew about their capabilities, she devoutly hoped the summit would deliver the former. In the days that followed, the Meridian Peace Summit underwent a remarkable transformation. Territorial claims were moderated, resource-sharing protocols were established, transit rights were guaranteed for civilian vessels, regardless of affiliation. The contested Kepler corridor, which had teetered on the brink of becoming a flashpoint for interstellar conflict, was instead designated a neutral zone, under joint administrative oversight. The official records would attribute this diplomatic breakthrough to the collective wisdom of the 17 participating powers, with special commendation for Chancellor Mthul's visionary leadership. No mention would be made of a human with a broken arm and a casual demeanor who had briefly attended a single session. But in secure communications and classified intelligence assessments throughout known space, a new strategic doctrine began to take shape, one that carefully accounted for human capabilities and tendencies. Capabilities that had been dramatically underestimated, tendencies that defied conventional predictive models. And on distant Earth, in a modest dwelling somewhere in the region once known as Chile, Commander Miguel Torres attended his nephew's birthday celebration. His arm, now fully healed, helped serve cake to excited children who knew him only as Uncle Miguel, the relative who sometimes missed family gatherings because of his job, but always brought the best presents when he returned. None of them would ever know that their uncle had single-handedly reshaped interstellar relations, or that his name was whispered with a mixture of awe and apprehension in the highest councils of alien powers. None of them would understand that because of his actions. The region of space where humans lived and worked and raised their families would remain peaceful for generations to come. Miguel preferred it that way. Some jobs needed doing, and he did them without complaint or expectation of recognition. It was what humans did, especially for those under their protection. When his sister asked about his recent absence, he simply smiled and said he'd been taking care of a work thing. The understatement made him chuckle inwardly. Some things were too complex to explain over birthday cake. Besides, the coffee was excellent, the children were laughing, and for now at least, all was right with the universe. The rest was just details.